Ridiculous metaphors, proportional to the level of ridiculous laws and ridiculous governance. Our present-day political and economic order here in America is ridiculous, profoundly disordered, and stupid, if not psychotic. And the problem is, while we tend to blame the politician or the system, we rarely take responsibility for our own poetry and cultural lethargy. The fate of American democracy has little to do with standing on the heels of an electoral process with media conglomerates. The fate of democracy rests on the heels of each and every one of us, hour after hour, throughout our daily lives, and is a critical feature in our network of relationships. Democracy is not a fixed constitutional format, but an active, ever-morphing tendency in a people to become more rational.
These people don't care. And if we don't protest and stand up and show them that we care, that's why they starting to listen now. I'm not saying our protest is going to make them get us a conviction. We might not get him, but we're going to get some of these police officers. I promise you that.
Fed up with blocking streets, apparently, and occupying college campus buildings, Black Lives Matter activists in California have a new tactic. One of the officers involved in a shooting death of Stephen Clark in Sacramento, California, was recently married. But on his wedding day, he had to confront invading activists.
Parents, I just wonder if you started planning your wedding before you killed Stephon Clark or after, and how you've been sleeping since March 18th. And I know this is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. He will not have that opportunity.
Can you get out of here?
Ever.
Hey guys, can you get out?
So we came here to drink wine and also just ask you how you're sleeping.
Now, look, we understand the social argument about the need for, a lot of people talk about prison reform. We know that there are problems culturally that we have to deal with. This, though, transcends a line in that we wonder, what is it really going to accomplish? What is your point of view on this? Because this just seems, not only is it not really going to accomplish anything on the issues that we're facing, but it really is a provocative dynamic that changes this into such a personal framework that people are going to turn away from what the real answers could be. What do you say to that?
Well, you know, Langston Hughes once asked the question, what happens to a dream deferred? And this is what happens when legislation is not created that will address the needs of people. For over a decade, people have been arguing and fighting and marching for the idea of comprehensive criminal justice reform in America. When it was hands up, don't shoot, conservatives had an issue with it. When it was taking a knee, conservatives had an issue with it. When it was I can't breathe, conservatives had an issue with it. What exactly is the protest that these individuals want people to have that will get them motivated on the issue of criminal justice reform? If we want the protests to stop, we need to have an actual congressional leadership.
Would you have a problem? Would you go and meet with the president? Do you have a problem with black activists and people, at least within the black community, who are leadership, meeting with the president to deal with these issues directly? Good.
I
Good
meet
for
with
you.
the president all day, any day on this issue. Frederick Douglass met with Andrew Johnson in 1866, a former slaveholder, to work out issues. The only way you make progress is by meeting, talking, and pushing through legislation.
But Americans see on television this kind of action of people trying to ruin, as they mentioned, they knew it's like, let's ruin this guy's happiest day in his life. You realize that you're not winning people. This is not a way to win friends and influence people, that this conversation about things Americans generally agree on. We're all affected by a justice system that's unfair. But, you know, isn't this the kind of thing that just keeps people distracted away from real solutions? You have to admit that.
Well, Tammy, unfortunately, these are the things in America that get attention. There's been more attention on this story than there was with the 17 pastors meeting with President Trump last week to push prison reform.
Well, you can talk to the mainstream media about that. That's one of the issues. It doesn't get coverage. Instead, and this is what you should be upset about, the media promoting things that make activist communities look bad, and then they play into it. I mean, isn't that something you should be speaking out against?
Look, if you look at the 1960s, if you look at the press clippings from them, they demonized the Freedom Riders. They demonized Dr. King as an outside agitator going into communities. There's never an acceptable way to protest until something gets done.
In our school, we try to emphasize different ways that students can demonstrate their learning. We really believe that when students have some ownership over how to show their learning, it increases engagement and their passion in what they're doing.
As a class, we kind of move together as one, but then we're all branching out, doing our own things for separate periods of time.
How did this help you grow as an artist?
I really like this style of learning because I am able to showcase my talents, and I'd rather be hands-on, working on what I want to work on, how I want to work on it.
The critique is a demonstration of learning.
How do we revolutionize the aesthetic of American culture in the eyes of the international community? That's the real question we have. How to appropriate the soft power of a dying empire. Whenever you break from tradition, that's avant-garde. Being skeptical of authority and measuring the legitimacy of authority, organizations, societies, that's anarchism. I look over from my car and I see two Hasidic women driving, and we're parked at the intersection of Avenue N and Ocean Parkway, and at the exact same time the two of them put their hands together. One of them put her hand together to sort of tend to her nails, while the other one put her hands to her cell phone and began texting, typing something. And I realized that we've digitalized the hands of prayer. We've digitalized prayer. We've put a smartphone between two hands that clasp. And we've turned spirituality, desire, and hope into an operational possibility. And for the past few days I've been driving between Coney Island and Bed-Stuy with a vicious brow, a face of invisible war paint. I'm a gangster now. Because I realize it's not just about fraternity based off of emotion, it's about fraternity based off of principles. A principled fraternity that I seek. Something akin to a gang, a mob, because of the world we live in. It's a realistic approach, is it not? To have a fucking crew that looks out for you, it's got your back, that multiplies you when it's time to. And I'm driving down on these massive project buildings and that I grew up in many ways down here, and Brighton Beach and Coney Island, and massive buildings like Colorado cliffs, like the color of clay, right up against the beach like Normandy.
Ai Weiwei has no difficulty drawing a crowd. The Chinese artist is well known for speaking his mind, no matter who that might upset. Ai is from China, the son of a poet who he says was called an enemy of the state. He's endured his own persecution, most notably in 2011 when he was imprisoned for 81 days. The global refugee crisis has dominated much of his work over the last 2 years, taking him to more than 40 refugee camps where he's spoken to refugees, officials, people smugglers, even grave diggers for a forthcoming documentary. All the while, he's created art in the chaos, stirred controversy, and found inspiration for his work.
Without taking care of those people who need help, we're all refugees. They're part of us, we're part of them. There's no way we can escape this. There's no way you can turn your eyes away to say, I don't see them.
Ai's next project will take him from boats to fences, 100 of them to be erected across New York City. It comes at a time when the US president is vowing to build a wall and shut out large numbers of refugees.
This is really a dangerous condition for politicians to use this kind of hatred and use this kind of wrong warning and trying to scare people.
Ai has embraced social media to get his art and his message out, even posting on Instagram in the middle of his talk. He says his work is so that he can better understand the world, and his art is to ensure people don't close their eyes and their hearts to those most in need.
I think they're beautiful works. But I also think that we need to talk about what these works represent, and we need to talk about solutions to these works. You know, the art world doesn't give a shit about people in prison. People in the art world don't really give a shit about refugees. They want to praise and glorify artists such as Ai Weiwei when they're at the peak of their market. But it's merely a fad. Even though he deserves this praise, the people that are being referenced in this work do not deserve to be erased. Art is not a laughing matter.
The reality is that at the end of the day, we are talking about the disenfranchisement of hundreds of thousands of voters. And most of the repressive voter ID laws that have been passed since the 2008 election. I'll leave you to figure out what the significance of that year might be.
So imprisoned, and then over the course of a month there was a trial in which he testifies on his own behalf, and on December 2nd, 1859, he is executed by hanging in Virginia.
when media wants to cover something properly, they will. In this case, I think we're all being taken for a ride. But I love your position regarding the president, and we know the coverage of that, and it was powerful, and it made the difference.